Good afternoon and welcome back from the lunch session. I hope we all enjoyed our meal. Okay, that's nice. We're moving to the last segment of today's activities, and that's the second panel, plenary session. And the sub theme for that is proactive approach to offensive security in fintech landscape. And the moderator for that session is Simbiat Sodiq. Please can we welcome her to on stage, please. This particular session, the only physical person will be the moderator. The other panelists will be connecting to us remotely. So I would like to welcome Rotimi Akinyeli remotely. Okay. And
Thank you.
the next is Adesoji Ogunjobi. We'll welcome you remotely.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I'm particularly excited about this panel session because we're talking about the fintech and the fintech landscape, right? And I mean, we're talking about our money here, where our money is actually staying. And it's very interesting, especially in Nigeria, the fast-paced growth of fintechs. I mean, today you see Kuda, tomorrow you're seeing Abeg, and I'm like, oh, what's happening? And when you see the when you see the number of people that actually use this, fintech application and everything around it, you definitely agree with me that security should be like a very very core part of it. So before I move to our panelists, right? Interestingly, the financial service industry is like one of the most targeted industry by cyber criminals. I mean, why not? Your money is there, your data is there, as the case may be. And in Nigeria, as we continue to grow at a very rapid rate as regards the fintech, security conversations are very, very important. So today we'll be discussing about approach to offensive security in the fintech landscape. So I mean, I can't look left and right to say, oh, you go first or you go first. So I just got my screen. I just like to start with Rotimi. Hi Rotimi, I'm a big fan of Rotimi. Okay, so we just get started, right? I mean, we're talking about offensive security. So what are we saying? What is offensive security?
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
we can.
so it's quite interesting to explain because this is something that some of us do day in day out. However, to succinctly put it, right? So you have controls in place within organizations, be it from a process perspective or you have technical controls, right? So where offensive security comes into the picture is when you are able to bypass those controls. So when you wear that adversarial hat, and then you think about it and say, how best can I bypass the security controls or those controls that you have in place, right? So this is pretty much what offensive security is about. And if I was to give a bit of background to this as well, right? So people would split security into maybe multiple domains. So you would have the offensive part where you are trying to break into things or you are trying to circumvent controls. The defensive part, right? So this would be the blue teamers. Those are the ones that they put in controls and they try as much as possible to make it tough for attackers to break through their controls. And then we also have the GRC part, and of course, one of the most important functions as well, whereby you put in governance, risk, compliance related controls, and then these three kind of marry, to form the security function in most organizations. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rotimi, for the high-level explanation of, I mean, insecurity. So, do you have an addition to that?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So, Rotim, thank you very much for that for what you've just said. What I'd like to add basically is that, and this is my opinion really, um, that offensive security actually would, for me, would mean that you're looking at intelligence, and you're using that intelligence to, to stop threat actors in their path. And so this could be, focused in-house, or it could be external. And so if it's, focused in-house or on an organization, you're looking at, say, maybe the red teaming stuff. Then if you're looking at the external, which has a lot of, caveat to it, you'll be talking about the hack back. So that's just what I would like to add to all of this, which, in the course of the conversation, we would expand more on that. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We'll come back to the threat intelligence bit of offensive security. What the approach is, that's done. But okay, I decided I'd like to your opinion, right? What are your thoughts, like on the security posture of the fintech industry?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. First of all, I'd like to establish that I actually haven't worked in a fintech, but I'd like to speak generally based on my information security experience, which I believe is applicable to all organizations. So, first of all, I would say that security is actually a journey. It's not a place where it's not something where you can say, "Oh, I've arrived." It's a journey, and the reason I said it's a journey is because the building block for all of the infrastructure, not for all of, let me just say, yeah, the building block for all of the infrastructure, I think I'll be right to say that actually has vulnerabilities. And as long as there's vulnerabilities, you would always have to mitigate, those vulnerabilities. And so, for example, if you look at the programming languages that I used to, that I commonly use from C# to Java to Python, they all have vulnerabilities. And so when you use them to write programs, obviously these programs would have vulnerabilities. And so that means that you would have to meet. And looking at the hardware part of it as well, the vulnerabilities in the hardwares, from even in the physical design of some of these hardwares, there are vulnerabilities, and that's why after a while you would find that there's a revamp or a redesign of these specification. So, and these are the technologies that these fintechs use. So long as you use these technologies, it means that there will be vulnerabilities in your environment. As long as it is your environment, it will mitigate them. So you can't say you've arrived. So it's something that you always have to do day in, day out. And that's why, security program is very important. It's not a project, it's a program, because it's something you do day in, day out. You do, quarterly, you do year on year. As the organization mature, as the organization grow, you do that continuously. For me, I wouldn't say that they've arrived, even though there hasn't been, much news around breaches and all of that. I could say they're doing well, but it's a journey, and they need to keep up, and they need to continue. Because the thing is that, and I'll say this to close, in a lot of fintechs have been valued, and so for example, you have one a fintech, I think one or two fintechs were valued to be over $1 billion. And when you begin to have such information in the public, you become a target. And when you become it, what it means is that people are coming to test you from inside and from outside. So, they have to keep up their games. They need to ensure that they have proper, and I'm not talking about technology security now, I'm talking about proper cyber security governance, because that's what drives information security organizations. Thank you very much.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Timmy, do you have an addition to that?
I think I just quite covered a lot of ground on this. I would just like to chip in that, usually when we hear people say fintech, right, you're thinking disruption, you're thinking innovation, you're thinking automation, right? You're thinking catalyst. You're thinking of, how do we make services affordable, right, to the common man out there? And this is what most fintech, companies, organizations are trying to do. However, the challenge here is from a business perspective, right? You want to move to the market, you want to come up with a product which you think, is going to change the way things have been done. And this is where, the challenge. And so, for instance, you'd hear things like, oh, we have payment gateways, and then we have, mobile banking services, and we have integrations, and then we have APIs and mobile, services, web services. And so when you start to introduce all of this technology, right, inherently, right, there are risks that comes with this. And this is where it becomes really, really challenging, right? So you have business on one hand trying to move very fast, but then on the other end, right, you also need to think about the security risk, right, that comes with adopting this technology. So there are quite a few number of, risk or exposure that, fintechs would typically be based on experience that one has had. So for instance, you would have things related to application security risk, right, based on all this technology earlier mentioned. You would have things related to cloud-related risk, right, whereby the business is trying to move to the cloud. Because again, ultimately, fintech, you're trying to do things differently. Now you hear things like, oh, we do not want an on-prem data center. We want to move to the cloud. Right now, we want to talk about containerization. We want to talk about Dockers, and all of that. So when you start to put that into perspective, you realize that you're really increasing the exposure landscape, right? And then inherently, introducing risk into the environment. The good thing, having said that, the good thing is there's been progression. There's been an increment in security awareness. So you would see that some of these fintechs now have positions or roles like chief information security officers, right? And really, once you start to have such roles, it means that, there's accountability, for cybersecurity within that fintech. And also there are some of them that start to adopt, best practice frameworks. So for instance, there are fintechs that are trying to, certify to either ISO 27001, or for those that have, payment-related integrations, they're looking at PCI DSS. So when you look at that, you would see that, there's really maturity creeping in, and the future really, really looks bright with this adoptions that, the business is coming up with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rotimi. So I quite agree with you because I've been in the financial institution landscape at the middle of the financial institution. So I think I agree with you. They're actually doing like a whole lot consciously to improve security. Not there yet, right? But there's like a lot of conscious effort to improve security. So the next question, right? Soji talked about threat intelligence as an approach, kind of an approach to offensive security. So I'd like to ask, what are the approaches to offensive security, and is there like a criteria per se to actually adopt any approach in the fintech landscape? That's
okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I think a couple of things, right? So if you look historically, right, people started off from vulnerability assessment and then they moved into penetration testing, right? So in terms of approaches to offensive security, you will hear things like, especially from maybe a fintech perspective, right? You would hear things like, cloud-based penetration testing or, application-based penetration testing. So that could be one approach. Another approach could be bug bounty. And we see that bug bounty over the recent years, right, is starting to gain prominence. And how exactly does this work? We're talking about crowdsourced security. So we have organizations that have, budgetary constraints, for instance. And because of that, they say, you know what? as against getting an organization, to come carry out a penetration testing, why not sign up with a bug bounty platform and then have this continuous assessment, right, of whatever I have, be it, exposed applications, web services, integrations that are out there, mobile applications, whatever it is, whatever the landscape is, they have continuous assessment. And this is one of the approaches that some organizations take from a bug bounty, perspective. There's also a part related to red teaming, right? And so people would ask, what is the difference between penetration testing and red teaming? Now, these are quite similar, right? So when you think about it, red teaming is more of adversary simulation. So, a typical pen test would say, oh, I have a scope. So my scope is this fintech IP address or web application or this network or whatever it is. But the red teaming approach would say, you know what, let's put this aside a bit. What would be the weakest link? What would be the fastest way to get into this organization? Could it be through social engineering, for instance? Do I need to send a phishing email? Do I need to do smishing? Is it phishing? Do I even need to do a physical attack where I need to drop, a payload somewhere? So this is one of the approaches that people take, right? So I've mentioned about 3. And there's also one related to the automated pen testing. And this is a new buzzword, that a lot of people are engaging with now. So you hear things like, I do not need a human to carry out, a pen testing activity. I want to just have some automation. I want to buy a solution, plug it on my network, and then real time, continuously, the solution is just doing pen testing. Even though this is not foolproof at the moment, but there are organizations that are quite, adopting this. So these are, some of the major approaches to, offensive security out there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rotimi. So you mentioned bug bounty. I know there's been like a lot of conversations around bug bounty as an offensive security. What are like those things you need to put in place to actually have like a bug bounty program for your organization? I mean, imagine there's like someone from the fintech trying to explore the bug bounty approach. What are like those things that needs to be in place? Rotimi, that's for you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I think a couple of things, right? Personally, as much as, yes, I think bug bounty is a way to go, I feel like there are things related to processes that need to be in place before you decide to bug bounty. So what does bug bounty mean? It means that I, organization A of Fintech B, goes out there, signs up on a website like BugCrowd or Arca1, right? And then say, oh, ye attackers out there, try to break into my, my landscape, my applications, my network, my system, whatever it is. So this is pretty much what, bug bounty is. But before going to that point, where you start to expose yourself, right, internally, you need to come up with a program to say that, let's weigh it from a risk perspective. What exactly is the pros? What is the cons of having either bug bounty or engaging, in-house resources? The second thing is, for in-house resources, for instance, or for penetration testers, you can easily bring them into your environment, put them in a monitored environment, give them a laptop to work from, have them connect to your network, you have screen mirroring or recording right there, and then you have full control over what this penetration tester is doing on your network. However, from a bug bounty perspective, right, you don't have that full control because they are not within your network. And so there are times you need to get assurance on controls that you've implemented within your internal network. So it means that you need to give this attacker who is based somewhere, either in Russia or China or wherever it is, VPN or remote access into your environment to carry out this kind of assessment. So there are pros, and cons to weigh. Having said that, if the decision is to go ahead with, bug bounty, then there are processes that needs to be in place. So internally, you need to have a bug bounty process. You need to have a program to say that, for instance, once, an incident or once a vulnerability is identified, this is the escalation matrix. So this is going to be escalated internally. This needs to be resolved within XYZ, SLA period. And then once this is done, also, who is going to fix this? And then there's also the part related to remuneration. Because at the end of the day, you have, hackers out there trying to find something in your applications. You also need to pay them. So there's the payout part of it. So at the end of the day, bug bounty needs to be looked at as a program. It's a life cycle. It's not just a one-off exercise. So once you have all of that in place, then you might start to consider and say, okay, do I really want to go for bug bounty? If I do want to go for bug bounty, what will be the scope of this bug bounty program? So I hope that kind of sheds light on an approach if bug bounty is a thing for an organization to go ahead with. Thanks.
Thank you, Rotimi. Yes, that actually did like a lot of justice. Thank you so much. Actually, back to you, right? What are your thoughts as regards bug bounty as an approach to offensive security in the fintech? I think you're muted.
Thanks. Sorry for. So I'm not going to flog it, but what I'm just going to say is that, and the reason I'm not going to do that is because Rotimi has done a lot of justice to it. But let's look at it from a different perspective. What exactly is the objective of all of these things? So whether it is bug bounty, whether it is red teaming, let's think for once as business people. Let's stop thinking as technical people. The objective is actually to ensure that um, you're protected, your reputation is protected, your infrastructure is protected. So in summary, is for you to have the right security posture. So and one of the ways to do that is through bug bounty, which Routine has addressed so much. But what I would also say is there's some other approach that you could go through. It doesn't necessarily have to be bug bounty, which for example bug bounty is a lot external, and like routine so you could come in internal, and also you could also have when you have the right governance process in place, because what underpins all of this, because what we've actually talked on is technical, but what underpins all of these, what makes all of these effective, what would make all of these worthwhile is governance. And that was what Rotimi was pointing, and I don't want us to miss that point when he said the right processes has to be in place, because more often than not, technology people or security people will think in technology, and that has always put us at a disadvantage. And that's why a lot of organizations, despite investment in technology, we still, the business people still are skeptical. They still, have some level of doubt. So, but we need to, that governance is very, very important. That's what I want to emphasize right now, in response to your question. The right governance has to underpin whether it is bounty, whether it is red teaming, whatever processes you're going through, to ensure that you have the right posture, that your application, is fit for purpose, fit for use. Do you understand? So that's what I'd like to say, and I'd like to stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Adesoye. I love that you actually emphasize on the effectiveness, because said having actually tools, technology in place is not enough. Like without the right processes, it's as good as you're not even putting them in place. So thank you so much. To the next question, right? What are the challenges you think having like an offensive security program in place? What are like some of the challenges you think? You're muted, I think.
I just like I do a lot of online meetings, so I just have to mute before they stay mute. So the thing is, I'm going to get it from two perspectives. The first perspective would be offensive security that is targeted, internally. So you're looking, like I said initially, you're looking at red teaming, and you're looking at offensive security is targeted externally. And I think more on the external. And let's go back to the definition of offensive security. This is my explanation of offensive security. So you're using intelligence that has come to you to proactively stop the bad guys in their track. And there's a term that Rotimi used, and I want us all to note that term, adversarial. So you see, when you're doing extra, when you're it's what's that right now? When your attack is focused externally, it's usually adversarial. And the reason I'm taking us in that direction is it has its pros and cons. It is very easy for us to identify, the pros and cons of, or let me say, the advantages of, offensive security that is internally focused. So more often than not, and because we're technical people, we can identify with that. We'll say, oh, so let's say, for example, you're doing penetration testing. Obviously, I would say that I wouldn't want to insult the intelligence of the people in this conference. I'd like to say that a lot of us can already, from off the top of our head, talk to the advantages. Now, but let's look at external for a while. Now, where you are attacking an outsider either come to you and attack to you, or as a result of the intelligence that you have, you are trying to stop an attacker in their track. Now, that's what I want. I'm going to focus on that. Now, that has a lot of. It's not clear to everyone right now because if you have to attack a third party or an external entity who you know you suspected is about to attack you or has attacked you and you want to retaliate, and that's called hackback or retaliatory attack. It's not it's the full aim is not known, and so I'd like to say that there's not so much advantage in that because I remember was it in 2017 the American Senate were trying to pass a bill on hackback, and a lot of other developed countries have begun to speak to that. So if you attack, you have to attack them back. There's a lot of around that. So, for example, you're looking at legal issues, and basis the fact that attribution, attribution speaks to pinpoint exactly who attacked you. On the internet, it can be difficult, and so that's why you have to be very careful, and that's why hackback, or what we call proactively attacking, or back the attacker is, you have to be very careful in that regard. So I'd like to stop there. So we need to factor in the legal, and we need to factor the attribution, being able to say this is that specific. In fact, when it comes to that kind of attack, it is not advised that as an organization you should do that alone. You actually need to do that in conjunction with the government of your country, because the fact also is that you don't have all of the resources in the event that the person that you attack, because they attacked you really, decide to attack back, and it's a nation you're facing. So maybe you're facing a Chinese government, a well-sponsored organization. You may not have enough resources to be able to face them fully. So that external part is not something that I would advise that any organization should embark on. And besides, it's an evolving part of what we're discussing, and it's not the consequences are not fully known to anyone, because even the Senate, when they were trying to pass the bill, the reason the bill hasn't gone through is because they said to the Department of Homeland Security to go back and fully understand what the consequences can be, because in the course of attacking, there's going to be collateral damage as well. So that's one part. Looking at the internal part, focusing on internal, it has a lot of benefits. because you can already identify your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, and you can already, close all of those. So thank you very much. That's where I'd like to stop.
All right. Thank you, Adesoji. Before I move to Rotimi, can start getting your questions, questions in some few minutes. So, Rotimi, any addition, thoughts?
Okay, I think Adesoji had covered quite a lot of ground. Uh, just a few things I would like to add in terms of the challenges that fintechs would ideally face. When it comes to either a cyber security point of view or be it something specific like offensive security. So one of the keywords that's been thrown around, when you mention fintech, for instance, is disruption, right? So you have a business stakeholder, that has a great idea, and says time to market is 3 months, and so this person gets developers, and you have people working on this product, and they just want to push it out to the market. Now this is where the first challenge starts from, right? Because you have the business, there's business needs, and there's also the cybersecurity part of it, right? So and this is where we start to see issues. So to start with, right, one of the key issues you would see is in terms of the resources that are being used, right? So most of the fintechs we see now, they have this remote working, because it's a culture ultimately, right? So they want to engage, let's say, a third party based outside the country to do development, and then another one, company to do, let's say, the testing, maybe quality testing. So ultimately, you have like multiple parties, third parties having direct access to your code, right? And this is where some of the challenges, from a cybersecurity usually starts from. So that's one point. Another point is when you look at things related to fraud, right? So a lot of times, you look at a fintech environment, right? And pretty much what are they doing? Some would say, we do not believe in the traditional financial institution, right? And because of that, we want to be agile, right? And this is a selling point. They want to be agile. So what they tell you is, oh, on my platform, as against spending, let's say, a week to open an account or a bank account or whatever it is, on my platform in 5 minutes, you can open an account and you can get running. And this is another way in which the cybersecurity challenge creeps in, because now there's things like KYC, for instance, know your customer, it gets the back foot because it's not important. It is not, they don't see it important because they need to go to the market. So that's one point. Another point is related to identity theft, right? So because of the ease of use of most of this fintech, either product services, right? Things related to, identity, ensuring that the right person is the one registering on the platform. It's secondary, right? What is primary is, we need to onboard, this customer. And this is some of the ways in which, fraud related risk, or cybersecurity risk usually, creeps in. So ultimately, not to take too much of our time, I think there's just this ongoing battle between ease of use, functionality, and then cyber security. And because of this, the issue would keep going on, and it's just going to be there for ages as it's been there. I don't think this is going to stop anytime soon. That's my contribution to that. Thank you.
Okay, Rotimi. I like the point, right? Okay, so talking about ease of use, security, and functionality, and because a lot of these fintechs, like you say, they're trying to make everything very easy and seamless, so they tend to lean towards ease of use, functionality, and as you know, why you lean towards ease of use and functionality, most of them actually just security. And it's like a very big challenge. Yes, we've talked about the problem, so now let's talk about the solution. Right, we don't just want to talk about the problem. So what do you think should be done? I mean, we've talked about the challenges, resources, business needs, and everything around it. What do you think should be done? Adesoji, you can go first.
Okay, thank you very much. this question has come to me severally, and this is what I tell people. In fact, before I say what I used to tell people, there was a time in my career I was always reading about organizations being hacked into, and there was a time I sat back and I said, "Are you sure you can help organization, to be secure?" I was alarmed, seriously. And so what happened to me was that I started reading when there's a particular hacking news, successful hacking into. So what I do is that I follow the news from start to finish, to a point where I read, the forensic reports. And that's the beauty of these developed societies. When there's a news like that, they would follow it, the journalists will follow it from start to finish. And this is what I found out. And it's very simple. And if this is what I want to encourage the people in this program to. It's as simple as that. The reason for most of these, I don't want to say all of them, but if I say all of them, I don't think I'll be wrong. The reason for those successful hack is as a result of the breaching of the fundamental, information security principle, from lack of governance to negligence on the part of the security people. That is just the reason. So things like Dr. Badari said something a few minutes ago, and he said something about an organization that lost $500 million. What did he say? He said they had Windows 7, I think Windows 7 or Windows XP, but an
XP.
outdated operating system in the environment, Windows XP in the environment. That's one. And so that was what resulted in the loss of $500 million. In some organizations like Colonial Pipeline, when I followed that news, one of the things that came to the fore was that Colonial Pipeline actually did not have proper information security governance. In fact, there was a time they were trying to recruit a cybersecurity professional, and people kept applying, and they never up as at that time that the breach occurred. They actually never had a security person in. So what it means is that they were just focused on making money. If you look at a lot of so it's just a violation of the fundamental security principles: segregation of duty, vulnerability management, and like my colleague just said, Rotimi, application security, access, identity and access management. It's just a fundamental breach of all of those. If I try to paint it, to make it look, to make it sound very nice and all of that, I'll be lying to you. Even the Bank of Bangladesh that was asked some years ago, it's just the report says that one of the things that I spotted in the report was that some of the top management people actually refused to allow the installation of controls on their system. In fact, the certain controls that they didn't have in that environment. So it's just a fundamental, violation of information security principle. So what it means is that let's go back, let's dot our I's and cross our T's. We'll be good. The hackers are not smarter. Sincerely, it's just that they are more, they pay attention to details. So I'll give this example. The WannaCry issue that happened in 2017. After NSA tools were leaked in January, Microsoft saw that SMB version 1 was vulnerable. Microsoft released a patch in April when WannaCry started, causing havoc. The forensic report shows that most organizations, all of the organizations that were affected actually did not patch. It's as simple as so. That's a violation of fundamental, information security principles, vulnerability management. So let's go back to the fundamentals. Let's pay attention to. It's not by buying those fancy, those high sounding equipment and all of that. That's not. Go back to the fundamentals. Thank you very much. That's my contribution.
Thank you so much, Adesoji. I think my take home quote there is just to go back to the fundamentals, right? Start from the basics, basically. Any additional words? We have like 1 minute, 2 minutes.
I think Adesoji really did a great job, right, in covering that. And so like he has said, it needs to be looked at holistically. So I really you start from tone at the top, right? For you to drive cybersecurity and have controls in place, there has to be a tone at the top. It needs to come from top management, it needs to come from board. Someone needs to show interest, and someone needs to be passionate, about cybersecurity, and this is where it can be driven from. Now, when there's a tone from the top, right, then you start to look at things around budget. So they create budget around it. Budget for the function, cybersecurity function, budget and budget, either capex, opex, in getting the right resources, whatever it is within, the cybersecurity unit. So once you have like these two, three key things, then you can maybe look at compliance. Compliance too is also a way to drive these things, right? So there are some compliance or regulatory requirements that mandate that, for instance, you need to, as a fintech, you need to, get certified to ISO 27001, or, if you have payment, related information, then you need to get certified to PCI DSS, right? So all of this really would drive things, and it would turn things around, right, within the fintech landscape. And then you cannot put in a framework, a cybersecurity framework, align it with, any of the, best practice frameworks out there, be it the NIST, CSF controls, ISO controls, whatever it is, and then you can align, whatever, internal practices you have, based on this, and then gradually increase that maturity. Parting word would be cybersecurity is not a tool, it's not a process, it's not, a technology that you need to deploy, it's a journey, right? And you need to start from somewhere, for instance.
Thank you, Rotimi. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adesoji. I mean, I learned a lot. It was like a very interesting
Thank you too.
conversation. Are you like any questions?
Any question, please? In the absence of none,
I think the panelists did.
yes. In the absence of none, we will move to the award ceremony for this session. But then, since our panelists are with us remotely, we will send in the award at subsequent time. Thank you very much, the moderator. Can we please put our hands together for them, please?
Thank you very much, everyone, for the opportunity.
Yes,